For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Coors Light. These days, everything is go, go, go. It's nonstop hustle all the time. Work, friends, family, expect you to be on 24/7. Well, sometimes you just need to reach for a Coors Light because it's made to chill. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged. It's as crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. It is literally made to chill. Coors Light is the one I choose when I need to unwind. So when you want to hit reset, reach for the beer that's made to chill. Get Coors Light in the new look delivered straight to your door with Drizzly or Instacart. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
In 2003, Nike signed 13-year-old Freddie Adu to a 7-figure contract. But Freddie didn't live up to the hype. He has turned down every single documentary project looking closely at the details of his career. Until now.
People are going to look at everything you did because of the hype surrounding your arrival and what they think you can be.
I'm Grant Wall, and this is American Prodigy, Freddie Adu, from Blue Wire Podcasts.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast.
I say this every year. People want me to make predictions. How many games do you make the playoffs? We're here to win games. We're here to make the playoffs. We're here to win a title. And so the expectation is that we bring a playoff type performance to the floor every single night. If we do that, we'll be fine. If we make the playoffs and we lose in the first round, no one's satisfied. If we make the playoffs and we lose in the Western Conference Finals, no one's satisfied. If you make the playoffs and you lose in the finals, no one's satisfied. So we don't come here to play games. We don't come here to just step on the court and complete season. Like, we want the playoffs. And so until we win a title, that's what we'll be chasing, and we'll never be satisfied.
Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. Bonus episode this week. There's so much going on in the news with the team that we decided to come back for an extra episode this week. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how's it going?
Who'd have thought we'd be here, man? 2 episodes in a week. Look at all this. Look at all this. I'm Paul Rudd right now. Look at all this bonus content we're delivering to you guys. It's just because we've been in this space for so long where it's like, especially like from the March through, I don't know, July months, like earlier this year, where we were struggling to come up with content week to week, and now there's so much news that we need 2 episodes in a week. I'm good, by the way, and ready to talk about some of the cool stuff that happened over the past 48 hours. The Suns get deeper and deeper.
Yeah, masterful job, I think, so far by James Jones. Coming up later in this episode, we're interviewing Connor Newcomb, somebody who's going to come on and tell us a lot about Jalen Smith, so make sure to stick around for that. Before we get to that, we're going to cover some of the news that happened since our last episode, and it was quite a bit. I'll be honest, the first thing I want to talk about here already feels like it was a month ago, and it was Dario Saric re-signing with the Phoenix Suns for 3 years and $27 million. There was a chance that this could have been extended out a little further. The thing about this offseason is there's not a lot further you can extend it out. Things are moving very quickly. Training camp starts in a week, essentially, for the entire NBA.
5 days.
But yeah, Dario re-signed on a pretty good deal. I look at it as, not a bad deal. I mean, this is a guy that's going to be in his prime for this deal. Pretty happy with it. What did you think when you saw the news?
Yeah, I think it's a super fair deal. I think, look, we've generally gone with the philosophy of don't rely too heavily on the bubble. I do think it's true, though, that Suns fans feel pretty much unanimously great about this deal from what I can tell. I'm not sure that would have been the case had the bubble not happened, had we not seen Bubble Dario in his sixth-man role that I think we all expect him to be playing now going forward. But yeah, I'm all with it. I think it's a very fair deal for both sides. I was happy to see both him and Javon Carter. We already covered Javon Carter on the last episode, but just both of them rewarded for their good play with 3-year deals, both of them.
Yeah, when the Chris Paul trade was first announced and they said that the Suns were going to operate as an over-the-cap team, what that essentially meant for people like us who are super nerdy about this is that they had the opportunity to retain all of the free agents that they had. My brain first went to Javon Carter. Like, literally my first thought was, oh, good, we can keep Javon Carter, which was actually kind of funny. But the second guy really on that list is Dario Saric. And this is not to throw any shade about Aaron Baines, who did sign with Toronto, and I'm very excited to watch him with that team. But Saric is about to enter his prime. This is a guy who still could continually improve. And I think the Suns found an interesting role for him, as we've talked about on this podcast, in the bubble. I think it's interesting to think about his role now, specifically with the way that the team is currently constructed. Mm-hmm. He has to be a center, basically, because Damian Jones, for all that he is, that Woj bomb happened in the last episode. It's fine. Like, he's not going to play a lot of minutes, hopefully. And then you look at Jalen Smith, who we're going to talk about at the end of this episode. Maybe a center, maybe a power forward. Seems like we're sort of leaning towards center, but I think I'm still open to the idea of him growing and maybe being more of a power forward going forward. And I've been trying to consider those two guys playing together, and it's kind of an interesting thought for me. I'm excited to see Saric full-time center, right? Doesn't it feel like he's basically going to be a full-time center for this team now?
I don't know. I mean, there's so many kind of combinations is the problem. Like, we don't know. We're assuming Jay Crowder is going to start at power forward. We don't actually know that. We have no guarantees for Monty at this point. I don't know. I mean, it depends. Like, I could see Cam Johnson getting minutes at small forward even, and then kind of maybe some minutes open up at power forward for Dario to play there as well. So it and really
then Jalen
depends.
At center, is that how you're working that out?
Yeah, it's difficult. Like, do we think with the way the roster is constructed right now, like, is Jalen Smith even? You could easily go 10 deep with this team and not lose anything. Like, you could have a solid second unit. It's a good thing that I'm saying right now. It just makes it.
But you are saying that Jalen would be good right away in order for that to happen, though, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. I think Jalen Smith could be a perfectly NBA-ready player on day one of his rookie season and still not get any playing time for a while until an injury opens things up.
Yeah. Yeah, I look at Jalen Smith, and I'm sort of thinking, is this guy going to be like an 8-9 minute a game guy for a while to start the season? And I would want that because I kind of like the idea of Cameron Johnson. If Cameron Johnson comes off the bench, Cameron Johnson and Saric at the 4 and the 5, and maybe a little spot minutes with Jalen Smith where Saric and Smith are sort of trading off between the center and power forward position depending on the defensive matchups, and then Cameron moving up a little bit. But I think the flexibility of them at the 4 and the 5 is actually really interesting. A lot of it, I think, is going to depend on matchups early, which is a nice thing for, Monty Williams spent an entire season basically gasping for air with the bench, trying to figure out who to play in a lot of these scenarios. And now he'll have some options depending on matchups. I think so much of that will depend on how Jalen Smith looks coming out of the gates, which will be interesting. But, I mean, Saric, if he can improve in a way that gets him a little bit closer to those bubble numbers, that makes him a legitimate sixth man candidate.
Yeah.
And if we have him and Cameron Johnson coming off the bench, that's not the worst like forward / center 1-2 punch. Still got to figure out that guard a little bit, but there's more to talk about on that.
Well, and that's what I wanted to shift towards. I mean, I definitely think this is a very deep team that's positioned for success in most ways, but it does feel like there's a lot of weight on Dario's shoulders now. Because going into this offseason, I was still holding out hope. Not that I dislike Cam Payne, but just he's inconsistent, or just hasn't proven consistency. An 8-game bubble sample doesn't show you that. So I was hoping for a stronger third guard, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. But I was still kind of holding out hope that whether it was DJ Augustine or George Hill or Luke Kennard or through any way of getting him, that player is coming. And now that he's not coming, well, we need to see Dario kind of consistently play the facilitating role that he did in the bubble. And so, him being able to rebound and box out and defend as a center, all of that stuff is important. But also, yeah, he could. I mean, I don't think he's going to be treated as a traditional sixth man who gets like close to 30 minutes a game. I think he's probably with as much depth as there is to this roster. I think he's probably in the 20 to 24 range. But he's kind of he's the best player in that second unit. He's still better than Cam Johnson because he's more well-rounded. He's certainly more consistent than Cam Payne. Although if Cam Payne plays as well as he did in the bubble, for an entire 72-game season, he definitely does have an argument. But Dario, he's that guy who can shoot, sort of, and facilitate, sort of, and dribble a little bit. And it's going to kind of be on him to sometimes take the weight off of Chris Paul and Devin Booker and be able to like go out there and lead a lineup. And that's a big thing to ask him to do. He's certainly worth the $9 million, but it is a big ask to kind of be like, okay, you're the guy in this lineup. Lead the offense.
Yeah, it's a little tough for me to picture him next to Jalen Smith right now because of the advantage that what you called sort of dribbling and sort of driving and sort of shooting. The advantage that is at center compared to power forward is a lot higher. But I'm excited to have him, and it'll be fun to have him back. And I think the role with him playing the facilitator, it's what he wants. I don't think it's any coincidence that he started to play better once he was given more freedom there. That is what I think he feels like he's good at. So just getting that buy-in, I think, will make a big difference. On our last episode, Sam, we talked about filling a guard spot and the guys that were left. You mentioned a guy named E'Twaun Moore, and then immediately after the podcast, E'Twaun Moore was signed to the Suns, which I think is an excellent, excellent fit at a veteran's minimum deal. Somebody that I didn't even expect to be available at that amount. I expected something like around $5 million for him, something more closer to the BAE.
Yeah, and
I'm pretty happy with this.
It's incontrovertible proof that I have sources, so
yeah,
don't cross me. Yeah, this is. I mean, it's a good move. He's, I think he was closer to the BAE. Like you said, I didn't think they were going to scoop him up for the veterans minimum. I mean, if you really look back, this year was E'Twaun Moore that great? No. But 2 years ago, this isn't that long ago, 2 years ago, he was like a full-time, regular, everyday starter for the Pelicans, who like shot the lights out. Like he was the type of guy who was in the top 10 in the NBA in three-point percentage. He dipped a little bit this year, but 2 years ago, he was that guy. And most of those skills are still there. Shooting doesn't really rapidly decline as you age. I tweeted out, we'll get to this other guy in a second, but both of the guys that the Suns added for the veteran minimum, one of whom is Moore, were 90th percentile spot-up shooters last year. And believe it or not, I looked it up. The Suns did not have another guy on the roster, or do not have another guy who's on the current roster, who ranked above the 75th percentile in spot-up efficiency, which surprised me a little bit. I thought a guy like Javon Carter, who shot 40%, might be there, but he actually wasn't. He was closer to 75. Well, now they went out, and for the combined price of like $3.5 million, they added two guys who were close to 40% three-point shooters.
Really impressive.
Just a really, really solid move.
I think what you want when you get a veteran minimum player is a player who's not too old that still has something to prove. And E'Twaun Moore is that, and so is Langston Galloway, the other guy that the Suns signed. these are essentially perfect guys to have on vet minimum deals. Because, look, they're not so old that they're going to fall apart defensively. Neither of them are great defenders anyway, but neither of them are terrible defenders either.
Well,
they're serviceable defenders, especially off the bench.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because they definitely fit the James Jones mold. Like, neither of them are incredibly sound defenders, but I think Moore has a 6'7", 6'8" wingspan, and Galloway's 6'9". Like, these are two point guard shooting guards. Very long players. So just by virtue of their length, they're going to play the passing lanes a little bit. They're going to break up some plays, just like we keep repeating ourselves about so many players on this team.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not like, they're both a little bit scrappy, but they're not like locked down. Ultimately, there's a reason they both went for the veteran minimum. They're not lockdown defenders.
When we talked about the team, we talked about who could potentially be running that backup point guard position. I think what James Jones looked at, the problem he was probably looking at, is that there were no legitimate guys that you would trust coming off the bench left in free agency. So what they did instead is they then pivoted to players that could play with both Chris Paul and Devin Booker. And I think this is what's really important and really impressive specifically about both of these guys, because both of them are actually knockdown shooters who can just hit wide open threes. And then, like, secondarily, if they have to catch and attack a closeout, if they have to drive to the rim and try and quickly create for somebody on the move, they could do that. They're not excellent at that. Otherwise, they'd probably be starters or at least making a little bit more money. But the idea that you can now attempt to stagger Chris Paul and Devin Booker and have knockdown shooters next to both of them when the other guy is off the floor, I think is a really impressive thing to do, especially when we're dealing with a team that had literally no cap space at this point. You could only sign veteran minimums deal besides your BAE, which it seems like they're going to save, which we talked about on our last episode.
Although they do have one open roster spot.
They do have an open roster spot. I personally don't see any guys that are worth it at this point, but we'll see what they end up doing with it. But I think to have that positional flexibility and to be able to do that is really impressive. I think there's probably some Suns fans listening right now that are thinking, why didn't that work with Ricky Rubio and Devin Booker and staggering those two? Why didn't that solve our backup point guard position last season? Fair question to ask. It's because the offense fell apart pretty big amount when it was just Ricky Rubio leading it because he struggles to score, and there was no real backup shooting guard, right? There was two problems there.
Yeah, I mean, you just made the whole video about that. Basically everything that CP3 does that Ricky just can't do.
Yeah, and I think that makes a huge difference, and you put some shooters next to them, guys who can run around screens.
Well, by the way, and that's very critical, let me tease ahead, working on a video right now. So I've been watching film of both of those guys. Not just standstill shooters, I want to make it clear. Like, they do run around screens, both of them.
Yeah.
That's really important. Like, both of them, you're talking about guys where you're going into the season with the belief that this is your 9th, 10th, 11th man. Like, not guys that you have to rely on consistently.
Yeah.
But even at that position, to have guys who can run off screens, not just standstill shooters from the corner, it's really cool.
Has Chris Paul ever played with guys who run off screens, Sam?
I think once before.
Maybe the best ever.
Maybe the best ever. Yeah, the white guy with T-Rex arms.
Yeah, I think he can adjust to that. And both guys can attack the rim. Langston Galloway, if the closeout is just a little off balance, Langston Galloway can get to the rim and throw it down. Nothing impressive like Kelly Oubre, but he'll get it over the rim. And Eastwan Moore, this guy has touch on some floaters.
He's got a buttery floater. He can't dunk to save his life, but he's like 6'1", so he's got a floater. He loves using that floater.
And yeah, I think it's really impressive to find guys that are like that versatile at that low amount of salary. And look, if you think that it sounds like we're kissing James Jones's ass at this point on this podcast, we are. He did a really good job. And look, and it's all about
Didn't someone even comment space. That on our we posted our podcast
on YouTube?
We posted our podcast not to YouTube as a video, but just we made a post in the community tab for our YouTube channel because it's getting more attention now. There's a lot of people watching our YouTube channel as of late. And yeah, I have to dig up the comment, which of course is not loading. But yeah, basically accusing us of kissing JJ's ass. And it was like, why wouldn't we? You know, like we have not always kissed JJ's ass. I don't think we did it last offseason at all. But this offseason, he's fully deserving of it.
Yeah, it's important to contextualize what we're saying here. Etuanmore and Langston Galloway, if those were the two best players that you added in an offseason, we wouldn't be kissing his ass.
Can I read the comment? I'm trying to figure out if it's appropriate or not, because it's a
sure.
It's not profanity.
It's not us saying it.
Well, I know there's people who are represented by this comment as well who will listen to this podcast. So is everyone just kissing JJ's butt now to try and get AZ Sports deals like the solar panel? Which that's first of all, lovely guys over there. They're doing great work. I especially love Saul, their new addition. But no, I think both podcasts here can say we're on the same page about this is a legitimately good offseason. Let's treat it as such for the first time in 10 years.
Right. And also they would never hire me after the things I've said about Robert Sarver. So I think we could go ahead and scratch that off of our list of future employers. But the point is, yes, these guys wouldn't be the best additions if they were the best players added to your team in an offseason. If we're talking about adding these guys at vet minimum deals, once you've made a team where they make a lot of sense, then you got to praise it. It's just really, really, really good signings at really great deals. And I think both guys will have moments this season where they essentially win a game for you by hitting 5 threes in a game when they didn't, when you really need it. And if you can get vet minimum guys that are capable of doing that, you did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, I think we basically just signed 2 Troy Daniels, but like with a 6'9" wingspan instead of 6'4".
Right. Capable on defense.
So like
not good, but capable.
Not good. Yes, exactly. Not good, but doesn't like actively lose you a game on defense. And to Troy's credit, he played on some really bad Suns teams, but even he had games where it was like, whoa, Troy Daniels has 6 threes. And there are going to be games like that this season for Langston Galloway and Etuanmore.
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely will. You guys know what I do. I've said it on the podcast before. When we get new players on our team, I reach out to people who have covered them in the past because nobody knows more about players than people who watch every single game of them. So I reached out to 2 people that covered both of them. Shamit, our friend from In the Know, the New Orleans Pelicans podcast. I asked him about Etuanmore. I said, does he suck now or no? And he said he's fine. He hits shots. He doesn't fuck up. He's a solid bench guy. Don't give him more than 25 minutes in a game, but he can start in a pinch. That's exactly what you want. Another guy I reached out to, Duncan Smith, who covers the Detroit Pistons, about Langston Galloway, and I just asked him, hey, Langston Galloway at a vet minimum deal, it seems like a steal to me. What do you think? And he said, that is absolutely a steal. I mean, so we think it on our end, but here's the thing. We don't watch a lot of those guys. We're just looking at stats and we're looking at some film. I asked the guys who watched a lot of them. They seem to think that these are great deals too. That makes me pretty confident in them. Absolute great week for Suns fans. A third great week in a row, I think. Very excited about this roster. There's obviously still there's a lot of pressure on Cameron Payne, assuming they don't stagger minutes with Chris Paul and Devin Booker right away. But I don't hate that anyway because there's offense from other places in the bench that there weren't before. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. Do you have any other thoughts on those 2 guys, Sam?
No, not really. I think just, first of all, that was a great insight from you, just reaching out to those guys. I think they're just going to be competent. I think it's going to be a sight to behold. Again, like these are not,
competent is exciting now.
Like I don't even know. I don't even know what the second unit is. I guess here's the last place I'll take this before we head to break. Who's the 8th or not? Like who's the backup shooting guard? Does Javon Carter automatically get those minutes based on the bubble performance? Or I think you have an argument for actually Langston Galloway plays over Javon Carter.
Yeah.
Or Etuanmore does. Like any of them could. Someone's going to end up on the bench not playing. Hopefully they don't get upset about it. But it's going to happen.
Look, if they're fighting it out for minutes, that's only good.
I mean, no, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything. Like Javon especially is the type of guy who has the perfect attitude where if Langston Galloway starts the season in the backup shooting guard spot, Javon is going to work his ass off to earn those minutes back. So it can only be a good thing if you have the right guys. If you have Isaiah Thomas and Goran Dragic and Eric Bledsoe, like it depends on your personalities.
Right.
But
I think that,
I think
that's
they did
the point
right.
I was trying to make about the stage of their career that they're at. Each guy is like 30-ish, and they still feel like they have more left in the tank. And at this point of their career on a vet minimum deal, they're 1 foot in the grave kind of as far as their NBA career. And that means that they have to work really hard to prove that they still belong in the NBA. And that's ideal for these types of deals that you're giving out. And I look forward to seeing that. And the truth is, not a fun thing to talk about when you're excited. If you have lots of depth at a position and the players are good, that gives you flexibility to make trades in the middle of the season as well, which is not the worst thing to do. Yes, they don't make a ton of money, but if you can fill a need elsewhere by trading one of those guys,
you never know what's going to pop up in the middle of the season. Maybe someone sustains an injury. You need to find a solution in a pinch, and that involves a trade.
Yeah, exactly. So depth at positions help with that. So excellent job by James Jones. Very excited about the additions. I think that this team could be really fun and really interesting. Moving forward, we'll talk a little bit more about what it can potentially look like, or how we want it to look going forward. We'll be back sometime this weekend. We'll record something. Have a great Thanksgiving. We're going to switch over to Connor Newcomb. This episode will end with our interview with him. Get excited about Jalen Smith. I think this will be a really fun team. 2020 has already reshaped how we work, and it's almost over. Businesses across the globe are challenged to be their most efficient, which means every hire is critical. Indeed is here to help. Indeed is the #1 job site in the world with more total visits than any other job site according to ComScore. Indeed helps you find quality candidates quickly so you can focus on hiring the person you need to keep your business going. Unlike other sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility over your hiring. You only pay for what you need, and you can pause your account at any time, and there's no long-term contracts. And now, Indeed's new way of matching you with candidates instantly delivers a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria that you can contact the moment you sponsor a job, making Indeed the only job site that can move as fast as you do. Right now, Indeed is offering our listeners a free $75 credit to boost your job post, which means more quality candidates will see it fast. Try Indeed out with a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. This is their best offer available anywhere. Go right now to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Offer valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions apply. Football is back in full swing. You might not be at the game this year, but you can still be in on the action at BetOnline. BetOnline is going the extra mile to make sure you can get in on every possible chance to win this season. From game spreads and totals to team, player, and coaching props, BetOnline gives you more options to wager than anywhere else. You can get in on their season opening bonuses today and start off wagering on wins, divisions, and championship futures all day, every day. Head to BetOnline today and take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. Don't forget to use the promo code BLUEWIRE at betonline.ag. That's BLUEWIRE, all one word. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
Balboa rejected again by Jalen Smith. That's 4 rejections for Sticks. On the other end, hello, how do you do? Those were Smith's first points in 21 minutes of playing time. Ayala, numbers, Sticks! With some big bark.
All right, very excited to have an expert on Jalen Smith joining us, Connor Newcomb, who is a host of the Locked On Orioles podcast, but also went to college at Maryland while Jalen Smith went there. And you guys may have seen a semi-viral tweet that went around as far as Suns Twitter about excellent sequence of Jalen Smith plays. That was Connor's. Connor, I appreciate you joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys? Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, first of all. And I was happy that that tweet made its way to Phoenix Suns Twitter, because that was definitely, I mean, Jalen had, plenty of great games, especially in his sophomore season, but that sequence against Rutgers pretty much summed up everything that he is and can be on the court.
Yeah, it was a fascinating thing. It was the type of thing, I think, like sometimes you draft a player, and I think Jalen Smith wasn't really on a lot of Suns fans' radars, I'll be honest. We had guys like Devin Vassell, Tyrese Halliburton, who are on the board. We expected them to be drafted. So when you all of a sudden have a guy that maybe wasn't really on your radar, it's easy to look up highlights, but something about a clip like that, which you posted, I think gave Suns fans a better idea of what it was like to actually cheer for him, because it was a sequence of events. It was an uncut clip of basketball, and I really appreciated it, and it was really fun to watch. For you obviously you're a fan of Maryland, and you saw Jalen Smith play. Just what's your impression of Jalen Smith? Just sort of as like 1,000 miles up, looking down on Jalen Smith. How would you describe him?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, he was one of the guys who lived up to the hype. He was one of the better recruits Maryland has gotten in the past 10 years and really of all time. And is from Baltimore, stayed at home. And there was always, a lot of expectations. And I think he was one of those guys who, was a top 30 recruit and lived up to it. And obviously, gets picked in the top 10 of the draft. But you watch him and, you put that stretch 4 kind of marker on him, I think, when you watch him play. But he's more of kind of a stretch 5 at times. And he, is a super hard worker. I mean, if you just look at his body from his freshman year to his sophomore year, I mean, the amount of weight he put on, the amount of muscle he gained, because he knew, they called him Sticks because he was 6'10" and very skinny. And he knew that to get to the NBA, he would have to put on a lot of weight and put on a lot of muscle. And he did that. And just as you said, watching from above, you see a high motor guy, a hardworking player who isn't, uncomfortable with the ball in his hands or without the ball in his hands when he is anywhere on the court. And I think that's more and more important in the NBA now. And that's kind of the first thing you notice with him.
Connor, I think you got right to the core of the debate there when you talked about is he a stretch 4 or is he more of a stretch 5? With what Suns fans are thinking here, I don't know how much you follow Suns basketball, but presumably, DeAndre Ayton was taken number 1 overall a couple years ago and is kind of important to the future of this franchise. So perhaps reasonably, a decent amount of Suns fans were perplexed on draft night when they looked up highlights of this guy. Saw obviously a very high-level finisher, a guy who can shoot the ball, we'll talk more about that, and also protect the rim. All of these traits that you want from an NBA center these days. But the question that a lot of us have on our minds is, well, can he play the 4? What do you think of that? Is this a guy where you think he has maybe a higher ceiling at the NBA level where he can survive on the perimeter a little bit and play long stretches at the 4 next to a player perhaps like DeAndre Ayton? Or do you think he is putting on all of this weight because he wants to play mostly the 5 at the NBA level?
I think, a lot of the weight was just because of how skinny he really was. They said he went from sticks to logs between his freshman and sophomore year. But, the big thing with that is his sophomore season, last year, he really did play the 5 most of the time he was out there. Now, Maryland had a lot of good guards, so they would go small. And, they had a shooter at the 5, which you don't see as much in college as you see in the NBA. And it really worked out for Maryland this year. They were in the top 10 and the top 25 the entire season. But Jalen, his freshman year, also was a starter the whole year, and he played next to Bruno Fernando, who is now a center with the Atlanta Hawks, just finished up what was his rookie season in Atlanta. And Bruno is a guy who's a much more prototypical center, and he was a guy who, when he was playing with Jalen Smith, was looking to be a first-round draft pick and, ended up getting picked by the Suns last year in the draft. And Jalen and Bruno spent a lot of time on the court together, and Jalen Smith was pretty comfortable playing that stretch 4 position while Fernando was in there getting most of his buckets around the rim in the paint, kind of somewhat of a throwback big man with the post moves, the drop steps, didn't take a whole lot of jump shots. So Jalen Smith was forced out to the perimeter, I think more than he wanted to, but I think it prepared him that freshman year playing next to Fernando, where I think he can slot in next to Ayton because, I know he's not going to take minutes away from, the Suns' number 1 overall pick. But I think that year playing next to Bruno Fernando, obviously they're different caliber of centers, but still, a couple of NBA guys. And I think that's going to really prep him to still play that number 4 position.
Now, what I want to talk about too is offensively, I think he's a fascinating player. The ability to shoot, I thought what was really interesting, and this is new for Sam and I, for the record, just learning about Jalen Smith. We don't really follow college basketball, more of NBA guys. I found it fascinating that he's able to shoot off movement, which I thought was really great. But I think something that's interesting is defensively, he averaged a lot of block shots, 2.4 blocks per game, pretty impressive, and it seems like a lot of that was sort of like help defense a lot of times. But when you look at his defense, do you consider him someone who could be like a mobile defender? Because what I worried about when I watched him, and I hate to focus on the bad things because there's so many good things here, but what I worried about a little bit is like what I call hip mobility. So an ability to sort of follow guys who are trying to beat him to the rim and just sort of turn fast enough. It's like a lateral quickness thing. When you watch him, is that something that you think can translate? Is that something he got better at from year 1 to year 2, for example? And how good do you think he can be in the NBA with that kind of movement?
Yeah, I think, it definitely helped, another thing in his freshman year, having to play that 4 with a guy like Fernando next to him who wasn't as mobile and really had to cover the big guys. Jalen Smith was really covering some small forward types a lot his freshman year. And it was a struggle sometimes. And I think his biggest weakness heading into the NBA, at least on the defensive side, is covering the perimeter. He's a really good shot blocker. As you said, a lot of those blocks come from help defense, but a good amount of them came against really bigger, Big Ten basketball centers, throwback guys who would see Jalen, see him, being 6'10", 215 or whatever he was at this time last year, and try to back him in. And Jalen is a smart shot blocker and, could still block those guys' shots. But as far as, trailing guys in the NBA and having to move out and play against some 4s who are, going to spread it on the perimeter and move around, I think that's still probably his biggest weakness. And I think you're right to be a little concerned on that. I think that's got to be the number 1 thing he's got to work on, because he's a great shot blocker. It's not just he's taller than the guys coming at him.
Right.
He's a very smart shot blocker as well. And he made a lot of key blocks for Maryland last year, but can, even, deflect shots, affect shots at the rim without getting his hands on it. But I think the biggest thing he has to work on is what you're talking about, defending guys away from the rim, staying on guys' hips and following guys around the court, which obviously when he's out there with Ayton and he's not at the 5, he's going to have to do a lot more of that.
Something that I think you can really help us out with, we've been talking about his on-court stuff up until now, and obviously that's very important. Maybe to contextualize this question a little bit, the Suns have had a lot of bad character guys over the past half decade to even a full decade. And this current era of leadership with James Jones at the top as general manager seems to be all about bringing in high culture guys who aren't going to cause a lot of trouble. Part of that is bringing in an increasing number of veterans, Chris Paul, Jay Crowder, we saw just in the past week. But it starts at the bottom floor, too, with their rookies. As someone who was around Jalen Smith in his rookie season, you covered him as a member of the radio station there at the University of Maryland. What can you tell us about his character and just kind of what sort of person he is?
Yeah, Jalen came in his freshman year knowing, obviously, that he was the top recruit in the recruiting class. He was the number 1 player in Maryland. He stayed home. There was a lot of expectations on him. But he also knew it was not his team his freshman year. I mentioned Bruno Fernando, was probably the best player on that team, having been drafted by the Hawks. A guy like Anthony Cowan, who was a senior this year and did not get drafted, but I'm assuming at some point is going to latch on here with an undrafted free agent contract. Jalen came in knowing he wasn't going to be the guy, but he just kind of fell into a perfect, really number 3 option role his freshman year. And then when it was, realized when he was a sophomore that he was the guy on that team this year, he took somewhat of a leadership role, but he's really a laid back guy, kind of a funny guy, a little bit dorky, and it's not just because you'll see him on the court with the goggles. That's just kind of his personality a little bit as well. But he's very laid back. He's very easy to get along with, it seems. He was, very good with the media, never standoffish, never, trying to be quiet. He was always willing to talk and break down his game and give his thoughts on the team as well. But definitely going to be a high character guy. I think he fits in with that. And you mentioned bringing in Chris Paul. He's going to be a guy who, although they're playing completely different positions, he is going to know that Chris Paul is going to make him better, and he's going to be a guy who's going to come in and listen to Chris Paul, and listen to even a guy like Ayton who's playing a similar position and want to learn from them immediately.
Something that stood out to Sam and I when we were just sort of looking through his stats was sort of an assist to turnover ratio that he has. So in his last year at Maryland, 0.8 assists to 1.7 turnovers. Now that stands out a little bit. And admittedly, he's a big man, right? That doesn't mean he necessarily needs to be creating a lot of shots for others. And playing on a team with Devin Booker and Chris Paul likely means that he's not going to have to create a lot of shots for others. But what do you think goes into that sort of high amount of turnovers to that assist? I know it did look like sometimes in crowds he panicked a little bit maybe with the ball from what I've seen. What do you think goes into that?
Yeah, so I think on the offensive end, the part of his game that needs the most work, honestly, is his distribution as a big man. And he, got the ball in the post a good amount, especially when he was playing the 5 and not hanging around the perimeter as much at times last year. And as you said, double teams would come to Jalen last year, and sometimes it would fluster him just a little bit. And that's definitely the part of his offensive game that I feel like he's got to work on the most. And that's where those turnovers come from. And it obviously contributes to the, less than 1 assist per game, because, he wasn't giving himself a lot of opportunities to feel that double team, stay calm, and find the open shooter. The flip side of that, though, at least on the assist side, is that, despite Jalen Smith being the best player on the team, Maryland had a ball-dominant point guard in Anthony Cowan, and a lot of Maryland's offense was run pick and pop, pick and roll between Cowan and Smith. So when Jalen got the ball, he was expected to score a lot of the time, and so that will do it to the assist numbers. But the turnovers, is something you mentioned. He was doubled a lot last year because teams knew that he was not the guy Maryland wanted to be their distributor and get it out to the shooters when he got it. A lot of times when he would get doubled, it would be more of a, float the ball back to the point guard out top and have to try and reset the offense. And that's where Maryland got into trouble sometimes last season. So it's definitely something he needs to work on. And I think he can get that turnover number down, and especially the assist number up, if he works on, kind of settling himself a bit when he is doubled. But, the other thing is he's not going to be doubled nearly as much in the post with the guys that'll be around him in the NBA as he was, being the top option on a college team.
Right.
Sort of, again, I mean, it sounds like, it's low assist numbers. It's not really something you mind from a center, but if he shifts over to that power forward position as playing next to DeAndre Ayton more than a decent amount, you kind of want to start to see some of that decision making. But again, we'll see. I mean, you're telling us that he's a teachable young man, so I mean, I'm sure it's something he could work on. If you had to give us a reasonable expectation for what you think Jalen Smith can do in year 1, just as a rookie, what would you be willing to bet?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you should expect him to, be a starter for this team year 1. We'll obviously see what they do. He could fall into that spot, at least from what that roster looks like. But I'd expect him to come off the bench and be a guy who is going to block some shots. He is going to try to get out and run. And the big thing he's going to do, I mean, you look at what he did from his freshman year to his sophomore year. I mean, the biggest improvement you can see with your eyes is the body and how he changed his body, not just for himself, but for his team, for his NBA future. And it worked out with him becoming the number 10 pick. But I think the big reason why he became the number 10 pick, he was a 27% three-point shooter his freshman year. He went to 37% his sophomore year. He was Maryland's best three-point shooter as a sophomore, really playing the 5 most of the year. And that wasn't, a guy who was taking 1 per game. He was taking 3 per game. And he was knocking threes down at an insane clip, especially in conference play. I believe he was over 40% from 3. So you're going to get a guy who will probably come off the bench, I would think early in the season, and I'm hoping he can earn himself a starting spot at some point. But he's going to be a guy who is going to thrive in the pick and roll and the pick and pop game. And I think when he's on the court, especially with Chris Paul, with the options that the Suns are going to have, and, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of times with Paul and Booker on the floor, Jalen Smith's going to find himself open, I think, on the perimeter. And if he shoots like he did last year, I think he becomes a really, really good, 6th or 7th guy who can knock down the 3. He's going to hit his free throws. He's going to rebound. He's going to block some shots. And he's going to develop into a guy who, hopefully is a starter by year 2.
Yeah, I'll say it again for Suns fans who haven't had a chance to watch a lot of Jalen Smith film. He's not just a standstill shooter that needs to be absolutely wide open in order to make the shots. He can set the screens. He can come around pin downs. He can catch him on the move a little bit and take the shot. Like it's not the typical center who looks like he's shooting a 30-pound basketball. He looks more like a guy who can shoot like a shooter. And if he continues to develop that, if he gets even better over time, the combination of rim protection and shooting on the perimeter are such a rare combination, I should say, for big men in the NBA, and it's vital. And I think it's going to be more and more vital going forward as the game continues to grow and evolve. I have a real tough question for you, Connor. Was it fun to root for Jalen Smith? Did you have a good time cheering? Because this is a lot of what basketball is. We want to have fun, and this guy gets up and he dunks and he hits some cool shots and makes some great block shots. Did you just enjoy watching him play basketball?
I mean, it was extremely enjoyable to watch him play. I mean, he was, one of those wear your heart on your sleeve guys. The emotion came out. His freshman year in the NCAA tournament in the second round, I was actually there calling the game for our student radio station. Maryland was down pretty big against a pretty good LSU team that has, turned into, they had 3 or 4 NBA players now on that team a couple years ago. And Jalen Smith wasn't having a great game as his second tournament game as a freshman. He knocks down a game-tying corner 3 with about 30 seconds left to tie the game. And then he missed his assignment on a pick and roll by about a half a step, which led to LSU's buzzer beater. And he was inconsolable coming off the court. As a lot of things happened in that game, but it was his, slight defensive breakdown that ended Maryland's season 2 years ago. And he has said that play itself kind of motivated him going into last year. And of course, he turned himself, after his freshman year, there was thoughts that he would declare for the NBA draft. There was a lot of talk about, okay, if an NBA team can get him and, send him to the G League, get his body right, he'll be a second-round pick and they can turn him into something. And there was a lot of talk about him leaving. He decided to stay, and it worked out. He turned himself into a lottery pick because he was motivated, and he was seemingly motivated by that play against LSU all of his sophomore season. I talked about the three-point shooting got so much better. He was much more aggressive around the rim. He knew how big he was and that he could finish in a lot of different ways around the rim. He got better in pretty much every facet. And if you want to see, just how fun he was to watch, A, watch the clip that I tweeted out of what he did, but B, Maryland played at Indiana January 26th.
I know exactly the game you're talking about. That was a monster performance.
Yeah, 29 points, which was a career high for him. He was 4 of 6 from 3, 6 of 8 from inside the arc. He made 5 of 7 free throws, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. And he made the game-winning basket on a really, really tough catch on a pick and roll where he somehow managed not to travel and make an off-balance bucket to win the game. At Assembly Hall, which is a really tough place to play, he came out of the gate firing. The 4 made threes was also a career high. I think that game's on YouTube. Go back and watch that game. And that is kind of what you want out of Smith at the next level. And obviously he won't get the touches on this Suns team that he was getting on that Maryland team. But if you can get just a sliver of that, he's fun to watch.
Sam, you got anything else for Connor?
No, I mean that's Connor. That's just really good insight.
I'm excited.
It sounds like an exciting guy to root for.
Yeah, I'm excited.
He was fun, and I mean, I think the big thing is just he's still got stuff to work on. But
right.
Just the body change that he made. I mean, he was literally like looking like the skeleton man out there, his freshman year. And what he looks like now, he's 6'10", 225 now, and he's got muscle. And just how much he improved between that and the fact that he went up 10% on his 3-point shot and became one of the best 3-point shooters in the Big Ten. That Maryland's got a solid coaching staff and a good strength staff, but now he's going to be working with NBA coaches and, essentially a coach on the floor and Chris Paul as well. I can't imagine how much better he's going to get.
Right. And a brand new state-of-the-art fellas facility. They just built a new practice facility. Were you surprised by the reaction to his draft pick? Because I think a lot of people kind of were killing it. And I think it's an odd thing to kill any draft pick beyond like the first 5 in this draft because the players are also relatively even. But were you surprised that people did he go higher than you expected?
Yeah, I mean, coming down to draft day, and obviously it's all gotten pushed back, so it's been more and more mock drafts and more speculation. I think the Maryland community, he was a lock first rounder, and we felt like right around 20 was probably where he was going to go. Now, the thought was if someone was going to reach and take him in the lottery, actually the thought was there had been murmurs that the Wizards were going to try to keep him at home and take him at number 9. And when the Wizards passed on him and they took the player from Israel, I think the thought around, at least the Terps community was, all right, he's probably going to fall out of the lottery, but, hopefully between that 16 and 22 slot, he'll get picked somewhere. And it was surprising to see him go to Phoenix. And, the Suns have done this twice now with Maryland big men because, of course, they took Alex Len with the 5th pick. What was that, 7 years ago now? And
I'm an Alex Len defender, but that's maybe not the best comparison to win our audience over. I'm honest with you.
Only comparing it because it was the Suns taking a Maryland big man, and it surprised Maryland fans. But I will tell you this, 2 completely different basketball players, Alex Len and Jalen Smith. I love Alex Len. He kind of started Maryland back to being somewhat relevant in the last decade, but completely different basketball players.
It's a confidence thing, right?
Yeah.
Jalen Smith just looks like he plays a lot more confidently. And hey, for Suns fans that are worried about that in any way, just remember, I don't know that the Suns gave any draft pick a good chance to succeed back then, just with the way the practice facility was and sort of the way the organization was run back then. I think Jalen Smith is joining the Suns at the best possible time to give him a chance to succeed in the NBA. And I think just for that alone, he's got a great chance to be a good NBA player at some point. And I actually think with his specific skill set, he could be pretty valuable relatively quickly. Definitely looks stronger than people tend to describe him as. Even reading 225, I was like, man, that guy looks bigger than 225. It'll be interesting to see his actual measurements when the season starts. Connor, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to follow Connor on Twitter. We're going to tag him in our tweet about this. Do you have anything else you'd like to plug?
No, just thank you guys for having me on. And all I'll plug is, I was excited to see him go to Phoenix because I felt like it was a team that, might give him a little more chance early. But the biggest thing, just thinking about him being on the court with Chris Paul, just kind of salivating at what he can do even in year 1.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Connor.
It's my responsibility, my job to build the team. I'll always show, I always have consideration or consider the thoughts of my coach. He's ultimately the one that has to decide who plays and how we play. You know, your best players, you lean on them for their experience, you know, for their perspective, because they have to play with these guys. It was a tough decision, but we knew that we were getting exactly what you've seen over the last 2 days. A Hall of Famer, an all-star, a leader, a winner, a guy that lives and breathes basketball 24/7. And that's the type of leader and personality that we need. You know, those are the traits that we want all of our guys to embody. Chris and Jalen, when you put those guys with the current group that we have, you increase our versatility, but more importantly, you increase our competitiveness. Those two guys, they bring it. You know, people want me to make predictions. How many games do you make the playoffs? We're here to win games. We're here to make the playoffs. We're here to win a title. And so the expectation is that we bring a playoff type performance to the floor every single night.
Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Thomas Hearns. Legends, whose four-way rivalry defined one of the greatest eras in boxing history. Relive their decade of dominance in the new Showtime sports documentary, The Kings, a 4-part series premiering Sunday, June 6th, only on Showtime.
This episode is brought to you by Ro. Confidence is everything. Women can sense it, and trust me, they love it. But if you're in your head worried about performance, that swag, unfortunately, gentlemen, it's gone. Rose Sparks keeps you ready. When the moment hits, you can step up like a superhero and handle your business. No doubt, just confidence.
Fellas, Rose Sparks gets you ready fast, dissolving under your tongue and working in 15 minutes on average. No waiting, no missing the moment, plus it stays active up to 36 hours.
So when the mood hits, you can go back to back to back, round after round after round. Ro connects guys with medical provider 100% online, so there's no awkward conversation with in-person providers. Go to ro.com/sparks to see if you qualify. If prescribed, new sexual health patients gets $15 off Sparks on reoccurring plan. Connect with the provider at ro.co/fourth to find out if prescriptions Ro Sparks are right for you. That's ro.co/fourth for $15 off your first order. If approved, treatment ships directly to their door. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and/or manufacturing review. For full safety information, go to ro.co/safety info.